Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this document. So in page 9 of this Epic of Gilgamesh, we have this best friends. You have Gilgamesh and you have Enkidu. They're best friends. They do everything together. They hang out together. They fight villains together. They go after women together. They do everything together. And it turns out that Enkidu has a dream. And in this dream, he has a snippet of what he thinks heaven is going to be like. In fact, a god appears to him in his dream. And at this time, if this happens in a dream, if you have an experience in a dream, people thought, well, it's pretty much guaranteed to come true if it happens in a dream. So let's look at this first paragraph on page 9 and kind of see what happens as Enkidu describes to his friend what it is he experiences. He says this: as Enkidu slept in his sickness and bitterness of spirit, he poured out his heart to his friend. So he has this crazy dream, calls his friend up and says, let me tell you what I saw in my dream. And then before he gets to the details of the dream, he kind of reminds his friend Gilgamesh how awesome he is of all the things he's accomplished. He says, it was I who cut down the cedar, I who leveled the forest, I who slew Humbaba. And if you look at that funny word, there's like a 1 in the upper right-hand corner of it, and it tells you what Humbaba was. What was Humbaba according to the footnote? A giant, right? So this guy, he is very well known. He's a giant killer. He's kind of famous. He says, now look what's become of me. Listen, my friend, this is the dream I dreamed last night. The heavens roared, the earth rumbled back in answer. Between them stood I before an awful being, the somber-faced man-bird. He had directed on me his purpose, his a vampire face, his foot a lion's foot, his hand an eagle's talon. He fell on me and his claws were in my hair. He held me fast and I smothered. And then he transformed me so that my arms became wings covered with feathers. He turned his stare towards me and led me away to the palace of Urkala, the queen of darkness, to the house from which no one enters ever returns, down the road from which there's no coming back. Before we even get into any more of this dream, if your dream has the queen of darkness, is this a good dream? No. In fact, it's not a good dream. In fact, this is now the description coming up of what he sees heaven is like. We described heaven in this room as a place where you meet your loved ones. We've described heaven as a place that's good. We've described heaven as a place that maybe there's white and clouds. Listen to his description of what heaven is like in his culture, which is Mesopotamia, ancient Iraq. He says this: there is a house where people sit in, where do they sit? Darkness. Dust is their food and clay is their meat. In other words, he sees heaven, he sees the afterlife, and everyone is sitting alone in the dark. And when it's time to eat in heaven, you're basically eating dirt. He says they're clothed like birds with wings for covering. They see no light. They sit in darkness. So this is not a good experience. But then he sees a particular group of people. It says that he saw the kings of the earth. And maybe he's thinking, well, maybe that was the bad part of heaven. Maybe that was like where the poor people are. Oh, finally I got to where the kings are. Maybe the kings will be doing a little bit better in heaven. Look what it says in his account. He says, after he saw the kings, their crowns were what? Put away forever. Rulers and princes, all those who once wore kingly crowns and ruled the earth in days of old, they who once stood with the gods, now stood like what? Servants. What is their job in heaven? Just to fetch baked meats in the house of dust and to carry cooked meat. So these people, even the best of us, the richest of us, the billionaires of the world, you know what's going to happen to the billionaires of the world? In heaven, in Mesopotamian heaven, they're going to eat dirt, they're going to sit in darkness, and they're basically going to serve the gods for all of eternity. Is that something you're really excited to be a part of? No. And neither is Gilgamesh. He doesn't want anything to do with that. And he wants to figure out, man, is there an alternative to me spending eternity eating dirt? Is there an alternative to me sitting in the dark Is there an alternative to me serving the gods forever? I need to find some assistance. So there's we're going to skip some of that paragraph, but do you see where there's that little barred section with a little baby triangle next to it? Do you see that section? Samantha, read that short 2 sentences there, where it says Enkidu dies. So it was his best friend who told him about this dream. And man, crazy. I don't want to experience that. Enkidu dies. Read that short section. Heroic. Yeah. Siduri. So here he says, okay, my best friend died. Death is a reality. I need to really think about what's going to happen, because if I don't do something about it, I'm going to be in the dirt. I'm going to be in the darkness. I'm going to be serving gods, and my life of now, where I'm a hero and people like me, that's all going to go away. So thankfully, he finds the goddess of wine, and he says, hey, I'm going to ask the goddess of wine straight up, how can I, avoid this circumstance? This is what the goddess of wine tells him. Gilgamesh, where are you hurrying to? You will never find the life for which you are looking. When the gods created man, they allotted to him death, but life they retained in their own keeping. This goddess of wine chit-chats with Gilgamesh, and does it look good for Gilgamesh to find a pleasant heaven, a pleasant afterlife? No, she says, basically, you're wasting your time. She says, when we, the gods, made humans, we made death for you guys, and we kept eternal life just for us. But she has some more advice. Listen to her advice. She says this, as for you, Gilgamesh, fill your belly with, and you might need to scroll to page 10, fill your belly with good things. Day and night and day, dance and be merry, feast and rejoice. Let your clothes be fresh. Bathe yourself in water, cherish your little child who holds your hand, make your wife happy in your embrace. This is the lot of man. In other words, with this response, Parker, what advice really is this goddess giving Gilgamesh, who wants to have a heaven for eternity when he dies? The advice is, you'll never have heaven. Heaven will not be for you. So because of that, all of us in this room, we need to enjoy the life we have right now. Because guess what? This life you have right now at LaPorte, this is as good as it gets. Your life right now at LaPorte, this is as good as it gets. So enjoy what you have. Because you, for all of eternity, will be sitting in the dark. All of eternity, you'll be eating what? And all of eternity, who will you be serving? The gods. This right now is as good as it gets. You need to really enjoy it. Are you guys thinking that that is something you just need to accept? Like, oh well, I tried. No. And guess what? Gilgamesh is not ready to accept it either. So it turns out there's one human who actually got saved once. There's one human who is actually in heaven. And that one human who's in heaven right now, he's got a funny name too. His name is Utnapishtim. That's a funny name. And if you knew that one guy made it into heaven, what would you want to ask that one guy? How'd you do it, right? Because I don't want to eat dirt. I don't want to sit in darkness. I don't want to serve the gods lunch forever. I want to go to heaven. So he goes to this guy, Utnapishtim, says, hey, let me know what's the deal. How'd you do it? And at first, Utnapishtim's like, hey, I can't really get into it. It's not really my place to say. But Gilgamesh keeps pressing him. And he finally says, okay, I'll tell you. And now we're on the bottom left-hand corner of page 10, the last paragraph in the left-hand corner of 10, where it says, then Gilgamesh said to Utnapishtim, are you with me? Then Gilgamesh said to Utnapishtim, I look at you now, Utnapishtim, and your appearance is no different from mine. There's nothing strange in your features. In other words, you're not sitting in the dark. You're just like living life. You're a normal dude. I thought I would find you like a hero prepared for battle, but you lie here taking your ease on your back. You're just relaxing. Tell me truly, how was it you came to enter the company of the gods and possess everlasting life? He presses him. Utnapishtim says to Gilgamesh, fine, fine, I'll reveal to you the mystery. I'll tell you the secret of the gods. And that's what we want to know. How can I get to Mesopotamian heaven? He tells him a story. He says, do you know that one city called Shuruppak? It stands on the banks of the Euphrates. Well, that city grew old, and the gods in it were old. And he starts listing off all the gods, because this belief is called, what is it called when you have more than one god? It's polytheistic. It's the polytheism. There's more than one god. There's Anu, there's Enlil, there's Ninurta, there's Inugai, he starts labeling all these gods that were there this day. He says, in those days, the world teemed, the people multiplied, and the world bellowed like a wild bull, and the great God was aroused or pissed by the clamor. When you enter into a classroom and you don't know any of the kids in the class, and you don't know the teacher in the class, what is the volume level like typically in a class where you don't really know anyone, you don't really know the teacher? What's the volume? Really quiet, right? Maybe awkward and uncomfortable. When you just came back from lunch, what was the volume level at lunch? Super loud, right? So the thing is, for humans, we as humans are super loud. And there's a word that we've used to describe the gods. It means that they look like us, but they act like us. What is that word? They're anthropomorphic, which means they need the things we need. That means, you know what? Gods need to eat, which is why we have orange wedges in front of statues of the Buddha. Gods also need to sleep. And I don't know about you, but how are you guys when you don't get enough food and you don't get enough sleep and people are keeping you up because they're too loud watching Netflix when you need to go to bed? You get angry. If you don't have enough food, you get hangry. You get irritable and you get pissed. And guess what? The gods, they need to sleep too. Like the gods, they believe actually need to get a good 8-10 hours of sleep every day or they get cranky. It says, Enlil, one of these gods, heard the clamor, and he said to the other gods, the uproar of mankind is intolerable. Sleep is no longer possible by reason of the babel. He says, I can't even get a good night's sleep up in heaven. And so you've had parents, maybe you know like you're up later than they are. You don't want to wake them up. Your dad's going to get pissed. When you order Uber Eats, you put on the directions, leave on the front door, don't ring the doorbell, because you know that's going to cause you problems. These gods all gather together and they say, you know what? We can't get a good night's sleep. What do we do when the people on earth that we made are keeping us up at night? They have a solution to the problem. Take a look at what it says. The uproar of mankind is intolerable. Sleep is not possible. So the gods agreed to exterminate mankind. Hey, problem solved. If we wipe out all of humanity, we can finally get some good sleep. Is that a good reason to wipe out humanity? No, it seems like a little, like there's not like a step. It's not like, okay, well, give me a warning. You know, you went from like 1 to 10 instantly wiping out humanity. And it turns out one of the gods at this meeting is not feeling it. One of these gods is not all about wiping out humanity because I couldn't get a good night's sleep. It says this, Enlil heard the clamor and did all this, but Ea, another god, because of the oath, warned me, Utnapishtim, in a dream. He actually showed up in a dream and said this to me in my dream, reed house, wall, O wall, hearken, reed house, wall, reflect, man of Shuruppak, son of Ubada Tutu, tear down your house and do what? Build a boat. Abandon possessions, look for life, despise worldly goods, save your soul alive, tear down your house, I say, build a boat, and take up into the boat the seed of all living creatures. Sounds like Noah's Ark a little bit. Now, there's a movie called Evan Almighty. I don't know if you've seen it with Steve Carell, where he lives in modern day times and he lives in Washington, D.C. And Morgan Freeman plays God in this movie called Evan Almighty. And he tells Evan that there's going to be a flood and you have to build a boat. Now, if you for real in your life, if you for real, Fiona, heard a voice in your head, or you thought Morgan Freeman appeared and says, hey, I'm God, you need to build a boat because a flood's going to wipe out LaPorte, you're going to kind of think you're kind of crazy, first of all. But at some point, if you realize this is real, and you start building the boat, and your neighbors ask you, and you say you like your neighbors, hey, what's with the boat in your front yard? What are you going to tell them? But let's say that you know you've already gone through the, yes, I know I sound crazy, but I know this is real. What are you going to tell your neighbors? Right, like once you get past the sounds crazy, like in that movie Evan Almighty, it's on Netflix. If you've never seen it, it's funny. You should watch it. At some point, you're going to tell your neighbors. You're going to tell your mom and dad, even if you know, hey, this sounds crazy, but X, Y, and Z. So he has a question. He says, hey, when my neighbors see that I am building a boat in my front yard in the middle of the desert, what advice, what should I tell them? Do I warn them? Do I tell them, hey, get on the boat? What do I say? And actually, this God has an answer. It says this. He says, I understood. I said to my Lord, hey, behold, what you've commanded I'm going to do, but how do I answer the people? What do I tell my neighbors when they ask? He says, oh, that's easy. Ea opened his mouth and said, tell them this. So I'm going to summarize this response. He says this. Samantha, you're asking me why I'm building a boat in my front yard. Samantha, it turns out the gods are angry at me. So I'm going to go leave. I'm going to go live by the Gulf. It's just they're mad at me, not you guys. You guys stay behind. And guess what? The gods are going to rain down blessings upon you. I mean, gods are going to flood you guys with good times. I mean, there's going to be like a tidal wave of goodness coming your way. So don't leave. Again, gods are just mad at me. I'm leaving. You stay behind. It's rain blessings any minute. See ya. Bye. Not only do I lie, but that's what the God told me to do. There's no warning your neighbors, none of that. And that's what he does. It says on the seventh day, the boat was complete. I loaded into her all I had. Gold, living things, my family, my kin, the beasts of the field, wild and tame. All of the, page 11 is where? All of the craftsmen, I sent them on board. The time was fulfilled. Evening came. The rider of the storm sent down the rain. I looked at the weather. It was terrible. I boarded the boat and battened her down. In other words, he closed the hatch. For 6 days and 6 nights, the wind blew. Torrent and tempest and flood overwhelmed the world. Tempest and flood raged together like warring hosts. When the seventh day dawned, the storm of the south subsided. The sea grew calm. The flood was stilled. I looked at the face of the world. There was silence. All mankind was turned to clay. In other words, everyone died in a flood. The surface of the sea stretched as flat as a rooftop. I opened the hatch and light fell on my face. I bowed low. I sat down and I wept. The tears streamed down my face, for every side was a waste of water. Everything he knew, everyone he knew was dead. I looked for land in vain. But 14 leagues distant there appeared a mountain, and there the boat grounded. On the mountain in a seer, the boat held fast. It held fast and did not budge. On the seventh day dawn, I loosed a dove and let her go. She flew away, but finding no resting place, she returned. I loosed a swallow. She flew away, but finding no resting place, she returned. I loosed a raven. She saw the waters retreated. She ate. She flew around. She cawed and did not come back. Then I threw everything open, and I made a sacrifice on the mountaintop. All of these different woods I heaped up, and when the gods smelled the savor, they gathered like flies. You know when your neighbors are barbecuing, you can like smell it, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go see what my neighbor's doing. Oh, what? You're cooking? I didn't know. Oh, do I want some food? Sure, I'll have some food, you know? You can smell when people are barbecuing in your neighborhood. Turns out, they make it, they survive on this mountain, and Utnapishtim is like thankful he survived. He has a barbecue. The gods show up, and they start enjoying this feast. Well, it says that one God who had the plan to flood the earth is pissed. He is super mad. It says on the bottom, all the gods gathered around the sacrifice except for Enlil. He shall not approach this because without reflection he brought about the flood. When this god heard about one survivor, he was super mad. He saw the boat, and his anger was filled at the other gods. He says, have any of these mortals escaped? Not one of them was supposed to survive. Who has done this? Well, another god shows up and says, who of the gods can devise without Ea? It is Ea alone who knows all things. Then Ea opened his mouth and said, hey, Enlil, the god who did the flood, how could you senselessly bring down the flood? It was not I that revealed the secret of the gods. The man learned it in a dream. Have you ever told your parents, like ask your parents, I want to go to a party, and then you leave out key information about like what's going to happen at the party and who's going to be at the party? Sometimes you call that a half-truth. This God says, hey, I don't know how this man learned about the flood. I didn't tell him. He learned it in a dream. Well, did the man learn about it in a dream? But who sent that dream? The God. So guess what the gods are even willing to do to one another? Lie to one another. This story sounds a lot like Noah's Ark. On the handout, on the PDF file, there are questions on page 8. I've circled questions 1, 2, and 4. There's an assignment in Teams. I believe it is posted already. You'll respond to those 3 questions. What kind of sentences should you respond in? You should complete. Maybe give me some examples. Don't say, they had a bad view of life. Why do they feel that way? What evidence do you have? You're big kids. Give me big kid answers. Thank you all very much. I hope you all have a great, magical day at LaPorte High School.